If you notice, it's always the anti-war protesters that are arrested for protesting against a war. It's never the pro-war protesters that get arrested for being in favor of a war. And that is because the United States just loves war.
Here in the U.S. show no signs of slowing down. Around 275 people were arrested on Saturday across various campuses. At UCLA, fights broke out between dueling groups. Pro-Israeli and pro-Palestinian demonstrators clashed when a barrier meant to keep them both apart was breached. Democratic Representative Summer Lee spoke on Face the Nation yesterday about her meeting with protesters at the University of Pittsburgh last week.
I think that the number one goal for them right now, just listening to what they had to say, is that they want to see a ceasefire in Gaza. They want to see the indiscriminate bombings and killings end, right? That is the reason why they're out. And there's a lot of noise around this that distracts from that. There's a lot of noise that tries to take away from that central message. But that is the central.
Yep, that's what people love to do when it comes to anti-war protesters. Distract, distract, distract so that they can keep you from thinking about what they're actually wanting, which is an end to the U.S. involvement in the Israeli genocide of Palestinian people.
Essential thing that they are fighting for, and they believe and they feel like our government can do more.
So our Tom Hansen has been following the latest from just outside of Columbia University. Tom, good morning. You know, Columbia, this is where this encampment sort of concept all kind of started. Where do things stand right now? Any breakthrough in terms of, the protesters negotiating with the university?
Hey there, Anne-Marie. Good morning to you. Well, as you just mentioned, this really is the epicenter of all of these protests that we're seeing unfolding on college campuses. And I want to set the scene for you before we get to those questions. As you can see behind me, this area used to be barricaded off. There was a heavy police presence last week. That really has been a 180 from what we're seeing today, which is a relatively calm scene. Now, this is day 13 of those protests. This is also the last day of classes for the university. That May 15th deadline, though, is fast approaching, where graduation will be taking place near where the protests are. Now, as far as where we stand with current negotiations, as we approach that deadline, there is really an impasse. We didn't get any major updates over the weekend from the university, mainly because things were calm. So we'll be keeping an eye on that today. And just to remind you, students here are really asking for the university to withdraw investment funds from what they describe as companies profiting from Israel's war in Gaza. But that deadline fast approaching with really no end in sight at the moment, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, and, over the weekend.
It's always profit over people. If a business company or investor, whoever can profit, they will try to profit, even if that means investing in a war machine.
And we can see this map. We saw college protests pretty much across the country. It seems like, the universities don't have a lot of options on the table when it comes to figuring out how to deal with these encampments. What options are there?
Yeah, really the central question here, Anne-Marie, is whether or not the university president will still have a job when all is said and done. Negotiations are still ongoing, but they are pretty much at a standstill. Now, I also want to reference this because Columbia now lists 5 areas where it refrains from investing. So, we're talking about divestment and divesting and all those things. Historically, they have divested from tobacco, private prison operations, thermal coal, Sudan, and fossil fuels. So they do have a history of meeting some of these demands in the past, although as it stands right now with this tense situation, that appears unknown. We're still really waiting to see what happens today after really no update.